introduction into our topic, but she also fell ill with COVID. COVID is in the air again. So she unfortunately cannot speak tonight, but she was so kind to share with us her lecture and also her presentation. And Dr. Anna Dorothea Ludewig from the Moses Mendelssohn Zentrum agreed kindly to read this out to you tonight. I just would like anyway quickly present Sabine Toppe to you. She has a PhD in educational sciences from the University of Oldenburg and is today a professor at the Alice Salomon University of Applied Sciences in Berlin. She's specialized in the history of social work, and she also serves as academic head of the historical archive of the Alice Salomon University of Applied Sciences in Berlin. And I'm now looking forward to hear her lecture. And now I need to switch this somehow.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much, Irene. It's a rather strange situation, but yeah, I'm very happy that Sabine Toppe sent her paper to us and that we have the opportunity at least to listen to her, to the text she prepared. I just will try, yeah, okay, works. So, I start. In 1904, the Jüdische Frauenbund was founded on the initiative of Bertha Pappenheim and Sidonie Werner with the aim of uniting the emancipatory and social endeavors of the various and numerous Jewish women's associations, combining feminist ideas with the practice of Judaism. For many years, the Jüdische Frauenbund was the largest charitable organization in Germany. Around 20% of all Jewish women in Germany were members of the Jüdische Frauenbund, the JFB, most of whom came from the middle class and liberal spectrum. The JFB saw itself as a part of the women's movement and was a member of the Bund Deutscher Frauenvereine, Federation of German Women's Associations. Jewish women played a central role within the bourgeois German women's movement at the end of the 19th century and in the beginning of the 20th century, and many of them joined the organized women's movement through social aid activities. Jewish religious principle gave girls and women freedom of movement in the area of poor relief and charity. For many Jewish girls and women, social engagement was the way to free themselves from the confines of domesticity. As teachers, they were socially undesirable, and the well-developed denominational nursing care provided by the Protestant deaconesses and the Catholic Elisabeth-Vereine remained close to them. According to a survey by women's rights activist and social reformer Lina Morgenstern. By Lina Morgenstern, in 1892 there were 30 associations in Berlin, led or co-organized by Jewish women, that were dedicated to social aid work. In the Deutsches Reich, there were more than 600. Lina Morgenstern, later an honorary member of the Jüdische Frauenbund, mobilized many middle-class women for social welfare activity with the Berliner Hausfrauenverein, the Verein der Berliner Volksküchen, the Berliner Kinderschutzverein, and the Verein zur Rettung und Erziehung minderjähriger strafentlassener Mädchen. Jewish women were disproportionately represented in the German bourgeois women's movement and were committed to women's rights, women's emancipation, women's education, and paid work, as well as social reforms. Around a third of the leading German women's rights activists were of Jewish origin, and many of them held important positions in the German women's movement, such as Lena Morgenstern, Jeanette Schwerin, Alice Salomon, Berta Pappenheim, Sidi Wronski, and Henriette Fürth, just to name a few. The majority of them came from families that belonged to the emancipated or assimilated Jewish community. After the Evangelische Frauenbund was founded in 1899 and the Katholische Frauenbund in 1903, Berta Pappenheim, Henriette May, and Sidonie Werner founded the Jüdische Frauenbund in 1904, represented here by a member association, the first board of the Frankfurter Verein Weiblicher Fürsorge. Quote, "Being Jewish, being a woman, being a federation, Jüdisch sein, Frau sein, Bund sein." This phrase by Paula Ollendorf, co-founder of the local group in Breslau of the Jüdische Frauenbund and director of a kindergarten that was part of the JFB, at the anniversary conference in 1929 reflected the Jüdische Frauenbund's focus on combined Judaism and the emancipation of women. On June 15, 1904, at the conference of the International Council of Women in Berlin, Berta Pappenheim and Sidonie Werner laid the foundation stone for the nationwide German-Israeli Women's Association, whose name was later changed to Jüdischer Frauenbund. The official founding date was July 15th, 1904, and the founding of the association was a signal both to the bourgeois women's movement in particular and the German Jewry in general. Berta Pappenheim, the best known and charismatic representative of the association, was elected as the first chairwoman. She subsequently held the chairwomanship for 20 years and worked for the association until her death in 1936. Sidonie Werner, a primary school teacher and social politician in Hamburg, who was committed to vocational training for girls and set up homes for the education and work of Jewish girls and women and domestic schools, became the second chairwoman. Henriette May, teacher, educator and co-founder of the Zentralwohlfahrtsstelle der deutschen Juden, Central Welfare Board of Jews in Germany, and the Jüdische Kinderhilfe, Jewish Children's Aid, took over the posts of secretary and head of the propaganda committee. The purpose and aims of the JFB statutes were to unite German Jewish women's associations and female individuals to work together in the interests of Jewish women, to promote popular education, to facilitate the working lives of Jewish women and girls, to raise moral, to combat trafficking in girls, and to strengthen Jewish community awareness. Specialist scholars critically note that the Jüdische Frauenbund was a women's movement that brought for certain forms of joint social action with the desire to make the world more human, to save Judaism, and to fight for a place for women in the Jewish Renaissance movement. The fundamental criticism was that neither political and social conditions nor the gender order were fundamentally called into question. One person always stands out when dealing with the history of the Jüdische Frauenbund, Berta Pappenheim. The women's rights activist and writer is considered a pioneer of social work and an important campaigner against the trafficking of girls and women and for the rights of women in Jewish communities. Berta Pappenheim was born in Vienna in 1859 and grew up in a home characterized by both Jewish orthodoxy and bourgeois values. Among other things, she wrote a children's book and translated Mary Wollstonecraft's A Vindication of the Right of Woman. Having moved to Frankfurt am Main in the late 1880s, she began to become involved in Jewish charity work. She served soup in soup kitchens and later became the director of a Jewish orphanage for girls. As a result of her increasing involvement outside of the home and her contact with the women's movement, Berta Pappenheim began to take a critical look at the role of Jewish women in society and the Jewish community, as well as the social question. Together with Henriette Fürth, Berta Pappenheim founded the Frankfurt Association Weibliche Fürsorge in 1902, and 2 years later the Jüdische Frauenbund was founded. Throughout her life, Berta Pappenheim endeavored to combine the aims of German women's movement with the concerns of Jewish identity. The dual claim to women, feminist and Jewish, formulated in the statutes led to conflicts and compromises. On the one hand, the JFB saw itself as a feminist organization with the aim of strengthening women's rights in all areas, which also included solidarity with non-Jewish women, and on the other hand, as a Jewish organization with the intention to strengthen people's religious roots and deepen their connection with religious ideas. In the area of tension between feminism and Judaism, the JFB acted and failed from case to case. The women's movement in Germany had been organized in the Bund Deutscher Frauenvereine since 1894. The Jüdische Frauenbund was the first of the denominational organizations to become a member of the Bund Deutscher Frauenvereine BDF in 1907, and Berta Pappenheim was a member of the BDF board from 1914 to 1924. In contrast to the Bund Deutscher Frauenvereine, the Jewish women focused primarily on voluntary social work in the fight for equal rights and campaigned for vocational training for Jewish girls so that they could also earn their own living. In this area, Jewish women remained more conservative than the Christians and non-denominational representatives of the women's movement. The founding of the denominational women's associations was viewed with skepticism by the BDF, which insisted on denominational and political neutrality in order to consolidate the unity of the German women's movement. When the Jüdische Frauenbund was founded, the BDF was particularly reluctant to even mention it and its representatives in publications. Even later, the BDF often remained silent about Jewish women in the women's movement and anti-Semitism, and refrained from commenting on attacks against Jewish representatives on the women's movement. In 1917, the Jüdische Frauenbund revised the statutes it had drawn up in 1905. The task of educating the people was specified. Quote, "The association aims to achieve its purpose, A, through popular education, youth care, fostering family life, and promoting early marriage." Unquote. Furthermore, it was newly stated that in cooperation with other women's associations, the association should, quote, "contribute to the promotion of social and national cultural tasks in German women's life," unquote. However, this patriotic commitment was then followed for the first time by the task of the Jüdische Frauenbund to combat all forms of anti-Semitism. The Jüdische Frauenbund was therefore well aware that an increase in anti-Semitism was to be expected. According to the statutes of the JFB, quote, "all non-profit German Jewish women's associations and their organized local groups," unquote, could become full members of the JFB. Female individuals aged 18 and over could be accepted as extraordinary members with an advisory vote. In January 1905, 42 associations had joined the Jüdische Frauenbund, and by 1913 it had 32,000 members in 160 women's associations. During the First World War, the number of members grew to 44,000 1,000 in 215 associations, and in the Weimar Republic the number increased to 50,000 members in 430 affiliated associations. The JFB was the largest women's organization in the Federation of German Women's Associations. Some of its representatives criticized the membership structure. Sidi Wronski, social worker, social reformer, and lecturer at the Soziale Frauenschule in Berlin, stated that the JFB was made up, quote, exclusively of well-off middle-class women, mainly wives and non-working daughters, unquote, and that the statutes formulated the strengthening of Jewish community life and social aid work as the most important fields of activity, while very little attention was paid to the working lives of Jewish women. Hanna Kaminski, a social pedagogue and later managing director and chairwoman of the Jüdische Frauenbund, sharpened this criticism. Almost exclusively married women make up our membership, namely wives of a certain bourgeois class. There is a lack of working women, doctors, teachers, welfare workers, and employees, and large sections of the Jews, unquote. Although the JFB endeavored to gain members from the working class, it was unable to gain access to their specific issues and problems. A particular challenge for the aims of the JFB was that the ideal of femininity in Judaism was the non-working wife, which is why the involvement of members in associations dedicated to vocational training remained rather restrained, at least until First World War. Only a small minority of organized women fought for the possibilities of a university career and the opening of academic professions to Jewish women. One exception was Sidonie Werner. In 1909, she founded a home for young Jewish working women in Hamburg. We already heard about it. And in 1910 initiated the formation of JFB teachers groups in Hamburg, Berlin, and Breslau, which fought for permanent equal employment for Jewish women and women teachers in Germany. The JFB's rejection of vocational training for girls and women could no longer be maintained after the First World War. The majority of the committed women were in favor for vocational training for girls, initially mainly in the domestic and care sector. However, they also encouraged talented women to pursue academic careers with success. Around 1929, Jewish women made up 7% of female students at German universities. However, the Jüdische Frauenbund remained unattractive for young women even after the First World War. Conservative values and the propagation of the family and the role of women as housewives and mothers remained present, and the JFB could do nothing with the new freedom of movement in the 1920s. Young women tended to join professional organizations or youth groups. As a result, the average age of JFB women increased significantly during the Weimar Republic. As part of the bourgeois women's movement, women in the Jüdische Frauenbund were committed to a synthesis of Judaism and equality, reflecting a great tension between strengthening the Jewish sense of community and creating greater social participation for Jewish women. They demanded more rights for Jewish women in the areas of education, training, and employment for girls and women's suffrage in the synagogue communities, with the aim of equal participation in all decisions within the Jewish community. In addition to combating all forms of anti-Semitism, other central aims of the JFB were the promotion of the construction of Palestine and the fight against the trafficking of girls. As part of the fight against the trafficking of girls and against being forced into prostitution, the JFB organized numerous campaigns. Girls were picked up at railway stations in large cities. Posters such as "Dringende Warnung an auswandernde Mädchen, nimm keine Stellung im Ausland an, ohne vorherige sichere Erkundigung", "Urgent warning for girls planning to emigrate, do not accept a position abroad without first making certain inquiries", warned against prostitution. Facilities such as homes for girls and the provision of work opportunities were intended to offer protection and help. In Neu-Isenburg, near Frankfurt am Main, Berta Pappenheim founded a home for young mothers, infants, and female adolescents in 1907, which she ran until her death in 1936. And in Berlin, the association had run a girls' home since 1912. The demand for women's suffrage in the Jewish community, which had been made rather hesitantly before 1914, could no longer be ignored after the First World War. The religious arguments against voting rights for women proved to be unfounded. A well-known rabbi confirmed in an expert opinion that there were no religious objections to women having a say in community affairs. The Women's League spread this view as part of its educational work and organized a national suffrage week in 1924. Opponents and supporters discussed the issue of the suffrage at numerous events in all major cities. Berta Pappenheim and her colleague Henriette May had already been elected to the board of the Zentrale Wohlfahrtsstelle, Central Welfare Board, in 1917. This was the first time that the monopoly of male representatives on electable functions within Jewish organizations had been broken. Despite much resistance, a majority of Jewish women were given full voting rights in the course of the 1920s. Even before the First World War, the Jüdische Frauenbund made efforts to establish an international Jewish women's association. In 1914, the Fifth International Women's Congress was held in Rome. There, Berta Pappenheim convened a general meeting of Jewish women who had traveled to the Italian capital as representatives of their associations. There were 70 women from 8 countries. They all agreed that there were many tasks that could not be solved individually. In June 1914, the editor of the JFB, Henriette May, reported, quote, "the need for an association to increase the sense of solidarity and responsibility without separating it from interdenominational, national, and international work was recognized by all, and the foundation was completed," unquote. Berta Pappenheim was elected as chairwoman of the Internationale Jüdische Frauenbund. Due to the outbreak of the First World War in July 1914, the Internationale Jüdische Frauenbund was only able to take up its work after the end of the war. In May 1923, 75 delegates from 18 countries attended the World Congress of Jewish Women in Vienna in order to build on what had been decided in Rome in 1914. The Blätter des Jüdischen Frauenbundes, edited by Hanna Kaminski and Martha Ollendorf, was an important publication of the JFB. They wrote about their aims, quote, "The Blätter des Jüdischen Frauenbundes want to give expression to what Jewish women of all orientations and circles have to say about the tasks of the present. They want to serve to work out the thoughts and actions of Jewish women more consciously and freely than has been done so far, to encourage each other to find and represent our own opinions, as women in cooperation with Jewish men, as Jewish women in general, women's work," unquote. The Blätter was published monthly from October 1924 to October 1938. After January 1933, the Blätter became particularly important because the mobility options for Jewish women were increasingly restricted and fewer regional and national meetings were possible. Hanna Kaminski wrote on the 10th anniversary of the Blätter in 1934, quote, "The magazine has become an important mouthpiece for us right now, which often has to replace personal dialogue and enables us to maintain contact with the women who had to leave Germany. After the National Socialists came to power in 1933, the program and task of the Jüdische Frauenbund changed definitively. On May 10, 1933, the JFB withdrew from the Bund Jüdischer Frauenvereine. Like the other Jewish organizations, the JFB took part in the fight for survival in Germany. It did this in a variety of ways, including preparing women for immigration, and focused on social work and female self-help for Jewish women who were discriminated because of their faith and gender. Anna Kaminski, managing director of the JFB from 1934, appealed to the members, quote, "The prerequisite for all self-help is an awareness of solidarity, a decent solidarity," unquote. Ottilie Schönwald became the last chairwoman of the Jüdische Frauenbund until its forced dissolution, with Cora Berliner as her deputy. More than 150 members took part in the last mayor delegates meeting of the Jüdische Frauenbund in 1934. Promoting the immigration of girls and women to Palestine became an important task, and in 1936 an edition of the Blätter was published on this topic. Other self-help activities included the care of all sick people who were unable to emigrate, the placement of orphans in safe foreign countries, the care of female Jewish prisoners in protective custody, and the founding of groups of working women. After the November pogroms in 1938, the Jüdische Frauenbund was ordered to disband, and Ottilie Schönwald was tasked with its liquidation. During the Pogromnacht, most of the facilities of the JFB were demolished, destroyed, or closed. The Mädchenwohnheim in Neu-Isenburg was set on fire on November 10, 1938, and the children's home on the island Föhr was evacuated and closed, as were the home in Lenitz near Berlin, the home economic school in Wolfratshausen near Munich, and the children's home in Flinsberg. In February 1939, the dissolution was completed and the JFB was transferred with its assets and facilities to the Reichsvereinigung der Juden in Deutschland. Most of the Federation activists fled Germany. Ottilie Schönwald emigrated to England via the Netherlands. Other women who had decided to remain in Germany and continue their social work in the Reich Association were deported and murdered. Anna Kaminski died in Auschwitz in 1942 and Cora Berliner near Minsk. In 1943, Jeanette Wolf and Lilly Marx re-established the Jüdische Frauenbund in the Federal Republic of Germany. Today it comprises 33 local groups and is based in Frankfurt am Main. Since 1954, the JFB has been a member of the International Council of Jewish Women and participates in international women's conferences. Thank you.